Good evening and welcome to the first meeting of the RCC Board of Governors on this August 3rd evening since the lockdown. Hope all of you are well and plan to stay that way. The first order of business is approval of the agenda.
So second.
Next order, okay, it's been moved in second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Next order of business is approval of the board minutes of the May 18th, 2020.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved in second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Next, the approval of the May 18th board actions.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved in second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Next order of business is the chair's remarks. And since we've all been away for what seems like forever, but then when you think about it, it doesn't seem like we've been away. Because we've been in our houses. And being in a house with a 4-year-old has been trying. She's finally, they've opened the school, so she goes to school 1 hour a day, and I live for that hour. But during this period, we lost 2 giants. A lot of people forget about C.T. Vivian, Reverend Vivian, who died the same morning that John Lewis died. And if any, I'm sure somebody here has seen because I sat here for the entire service, which was just absolutely incredible. And was happy to read that the ratings for Fox collapsed for that day. It was fantastic to see 3 living presidents, and then the 4th, Carter sent a message later. So my poem this evening, When Great Trees Fall, by Maya Angelou. When great trees fall, rocks on distant hills shudder. Lions hunker down in tall grasses, and even elephants lumber after safety. When great trees fall in forests, small things recoil into silence, their senses eroded beyond fear. When great souls die, the air around us becomes light, rare, sterile. We breathe briefly, our eyes briefly see with a hurtful clarity. Our memory, suddenly sharpened, examines gnaws on kind words, unsaid, promised walks never taken. Great souls die, and our reality, bound to them, takes leave of us. Our souls, dependent upon their nurture, now shrink wizened. Our minds, formed and informed by their radiance, fall away. We are not so much maddened as reduced to the unutterable ignorance of dark, cold caves. And when great souls die, after a period peace blooms, slowly and always irregularly. Spaces filled with a kind of soothing electric vibration. Our senses restored, never to be the same, whisper to us, they existed. They existed. We can be and be better, for they existed.
That's beautiful.
And while we've been in, I say thank you to Disney Plus. I have seen Hamilton 4 times, and the 4-year-old can sing most of the songs, and she likes to sing them while they're singing them, so it's hard for me to watch it for a 5th time. But somebody needs to please help me. Has anybody seen Black is King?
Not yet. It's on the list.
I tried.
Beyonce.
It's fantastic to look at, and I need help translating it.
You can use closed caption.
No, it's not the words. The idea, I'm losing things within it. I get the overall picture, but I'm just, but it's great to look at, fantastic. But thanks to them for opening up a lot of things, and you could also see on Playbill and the Broadway channel, you could see other things that, because Broadway is gone now and Billy Porter is out trying to raise money for all those people who don't have jobs. We forget all about them. You see the people on the stage, you forget about all those people back there working to put it together.
All of us that came out with the nice people really lost
Yeah.
it.
Because,
And to lose your home because you work, you can't stay here, it's very expensive.
yeah. Okay, next is the introduction of our visitors and citizen input. Now we move to the July 20th preference poll committee report.
I'm not gonna read the whole report, it's inside, but I would like to say some key things for those of you who are not here with us for the meeting. The main thing, I got out of the meeting is that we really need to understand that this is a preference poll and not an election, and we had a very interesting debate about what you're allowed to do or not allowed to do, and I appreciate everybody's input, but I think there's some good came out of it, like what's considered boundaries of RCC, where you can say things, where you cannot. And that's a good suggestion, which we did and some we did not. And I think the key thing I understand, and I will say over and over again, this is a preference poll. And if you're a candidate, you know this is what a candidate, there are rules and regulations that they need to follow, and they are written very well within the booklet. So the candidate who's going, not running, but who plans to put his or her name into the pool should become familiar with that. What else was I going to say? We made some amendments that I understand was a question.
Next meeting.
Yeah, the next meeting, so we should, well, I guess we were talking about this in general, we want to make sure we're all on the same page about how this works, what can be said, who cannot say things, and I thought we kind of dealt with it and kind of voted on, but for anything to be changed, it does take a board decision to vote on, so we cannot change it in between. We have to do it during a meeting where we bring the issue up, we talk about it, we debate it, and then we take a poll. So it will be curved until our next meeting. But the preference poll is still going to go. I think we're not going to hold it up until we have a meeting.
Yeah, the candidate handbook and the materials are out in both facilities now, and they're posted on the website. And there's been both the press release regarding the candidate filing period as well as constant contact messages.
How many people have filed so far, Eddie?
I've never looked at it, I don't think so.
Only 2 days.
Pardon?
It's only been 2 days that it's.
Well, I would have thought there'd be some people who decided to start to actually do it the first day, but not so. Okay.
So we will keep everyone posted on that. Like I said, we have the rules and regulations that everybody must follow. So take action at the next meeting. I think that's it. Anything else?
Okay, thank you. Do you need to approve that meeting?
Motion to approve. Second.
Been moved and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Next, order of business is board member input on activities attended since we were here last. You got anything that's,
I'm on a call every day dealing with park. Okay. So people are anxious to get outside. Typical weekend, typically been 139% oversubscribed. So people are not distancing. not wearing masks. So we're seeing a little bit of an increase, which is kind of disheartening. We've opened up almost all of the rec centers now. They have limited hours. We just finished up the Sports Tourism Task Force and the final Selfish report, so that'll be coming up. So we'll be able to look to ski in Fairfax County at some point in the near future. With Mount Trashmore, looks like it's going to be put on the
Now the landfill,
on the landfill, if you're familiar with the ski slope in Dubai, in the shopping center, that's the company that is going to be building
in the south,
here in Fairfax. Yes.
south, you know, Lord.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the last thing is I've been asked by Chairman McKay to sit on the equity test.
Are the managers and staff at the rec centers empowered to enforce the mask? And what about you?
Well, we ask everybody who comes into the facility to put on a mask if they don't have one. We have masks to distribute to them. There's no statutory regulation that you can enforce. You can't call the police. You have to rely on courtesy and example setting and moral persuasion. We haven't had any problems. So
That's
Ditto
the
for
same
us.
with the other rest of
Ditto
the
with
rec
us, yeah.
Because I've read some stories about some nasty incidences at CVS and other.
Ditto for us.
but not here.
COVID testing is available on Wednesday night if you live within 2 miles of the Southgate Community Center. It's free from 5 until 8 of May.
Right.
You have to go online to sign up for it.
The focus is on people who suspect they may be positive. So if you're experiencing no symptoms and you feel relatively confident you wouldn't have encountered COVID based on your own circumstances, that's not the population they're targeting. They're targeting people who have to go to work, people who are living in more crowded situations. They're targeting the Hispanic community in particular because the percentage of COVID-19 incidents in the Hispanic community is much higher than in any other ethnic group across the county. So that's sort of the target population for the testing.
I hope their tests are faster than the one I took.
They
15
they
days
will-
to get the results back, by which time I'd spread it there. It was negative, but it's useless.
I think their goal is to return results within 5 days because of the.
That's what I was told.
Well-
If it's a quest, it could be a long time.
Even that's too long,
Well, but it's better to get the information than not to.
right?
A special effort was made to reach out to the Southgate community. There's a lot of same people around there. Often hard to get someplace else, you have to go to work, can't always get the test. And Ricardo and everyone else who works there, they're doing a phenomenal job that people who live there or like say 1 2 mile radius can actually have the test done. Right, and so they will do as quickly as they can, but the opportunity to find out, contact tracing, they're working on that. So it is more of a positive thing than the negative thing you hear about society. I just want to say that in a positive thing, so we don't discourage people from coming in.
Right. And their goal is to immediately provide people with resources
Right.
that they need to be able to take the next steps if they are indeed positive, to get support, housing or social services support if that's appropriate, and to not feel like they have to deal with it on their own and by themselves.
And I would just add, because equity, this is a population that's making it safe for us to go out and do things while we stay in our houses. Like I was saying, they have to go out and work. So this is a positive thing. The testing is coming into that. And express
the purposeful committee meeting. And frankly, my house, almost all of our lives has been around focusing on school reopening. So it's just a daily conversation from morning to night.
Did you get a chance to get to swim here at our wonderful new facility? It's spectacular. Water's very nice. And Betsy and I did provide lunch at the shelter for 60 people not long ago. And that was quite the experience. I didn't realize 60 people could be so ravenous, but it was worthwhile. I will lie low.
So, P&Z committee did meet in that period. They canceled a couple of meetings, but they did meet, and then the new master plan task force met once before Walter had his surgery, and now our next meeting will be mid-September,
Is Walter okay now?
as far as I know.
It's coming along.
Support every outdoor venue possible to take an 8-year-old active to
Explore venues for Hannah.
Oh,
and it's been about the extent of it, other than staying low and happy.
I should add, and enjoying farmers markets.
It's pretty much the same with me. I also went to the Perfect Home Committee meeting, and I've been watching on YouTube, which I really enjoy.
Great.
And that's really been a marvelous thing to put up when nothing else can be put up. So I really appreciate that. Other than that, Meg and I are just staying at home, trying to stay healthy. That's it.
You're going to need to do a washing thing. You're not going to be happy when you go down and see this thing.
Sorry.
It's staying on your shirt. You drop something on your shirt.
Oh.
That's going to leave a mark.
Something about that.
Well,
folks.
shout it out.
It's something on it. It's a nice shirt.
Like everyone else,
It is a nice shirt. I have to get it clean.
I've been trying to stay healthy like everybody else, do a lot of they call it social distancing and isolate myself so I could actually visit my grandchild in Pennsylvania. We really try to stay at home for as long as we can and go see them so we don't take stuff to another state. A lot of online Zoom calls for different things, but I've always been an inactive member of the NAACP, but since June 1st, I said, put your words into action, and I've always been an advocate and follower of John Lewis, and I just said, you know what, good trouble. Not that the NAACP was talking good trouble, they're just doing good work, they've done it all the time, but I remember I looked at some things online about what they're doing in the school system, and it's amazing. If you ever go to one of those meetings, you need to go online to see the inequity in the school system. There's some things you really have to look at, like, wow. So I found out a lot more, and it's a very diverse group, so everyone's involved, but it's just making sure that in this phenomenal county we live in, that we don't leave behind certain groups of students because of where they live or the color of skin or whatever. So I've been online trying to become a very active member there. And the South Beach community said they're starting to do more meetings again. That community is hurting hard in a lot of different ways. Many of them are service workers. They're out there. They didn't get to stay home long. And it's kind of scary. Think about their kids too. Their kids' equity need to be in school like everyone else, but they want to be safe. And so this whole thing that's happening, I do feel, I don't want to use the word privilege, but I feel I have certain advantages and I want me to stay safe or do certain things that people in my community don't have. It's really made me a lot more aware. So my getting into trouble is to keep banging on that thing, say, hey, but it's not perfect, and let people know. So, I do a lot of equity work, but boy, I've had to step it up, which can be trying, but it is necessary. So we'll hear a lot more from you. I'm in trouble.
That's good. I've had, one of the Zoom meetings we have just about every week is with our Peace and Justice Ministry at the church. Because just for me, the worship online are kind of getting old. But we do have meetings with the justice, and they're trying to come up with different things, so I'm going to talk to you about some stuff that we can take back there. And I came to the preference board meeting, and also the fact that something that people haven't seemed to pay any attention to, and Chris Hayes has a whole, I don't know if it's just one podcast, but not more, on the fact that the schools are desegregated. And it happened, and nobody noticed. It started slowly, because I remember in DC, right, probably 2 years after it started to change. But it's, in some things we've taken 2 steps forward, and others 1 step back. And so there's a lot of things that have to be.
You mean resegregated,
Resegregated.
not
Yeah,
desegregated?
yes, they've been
Oh.
resegregated, yes.
I heard the same thing.
I
thought it was
right,
just my
yes.
Right.
Okay.
And
I knew we should.
I knew what you meant, but
Yeah, but
Just to
you
be
have
clear
to
for
say
the
it.
record.
Right.
For the record,
You have to
yeah.
pick it off and, pick this off and say
Yeah.
it. Resegregated, and that started to happen in DC immediately because of the neighborhood things. They just redrew the lines and we were outside of it. But it's something that nobody seems to talk about. And Chris Hayes has taken that up. Yeah. Okay, next is Lila's show. We have been the opening act for the Lila show.
Well, if you'll turn, we'll start with the year-end figures, and there are notes at the beginning as well as interspersed for the various categories. I think just in general, if you recall back in May, we projected about a $5.1 million ending balance for this fiscal year. And we've come out about $500,000 better than that with the current ending balance that we projected. It's about $5.6 million that we'll start FY21 with. And remember, that's just our beginning balance. All of that is assigned to reserve categories. It's not available to spend. So things that are notable in terms of generally with respect to COVID-19 in the front notes, I wanted to enumerate the amounts in the different categories that we refunded. There's also a table that I've inserted in the COVID-19 pages of the public hearing slides that details those, because I think that's a question the public will be curious about. I think what it's important to remember in terms of that revenue that was refunded, the summer camps revenue would have been, we take it in the fiscal year starting in February, but all the revenue that we accumulate for summer camps is then reversed in order to assign it to the following fiscal year, because that's when the camps occur. So the impact of that, whatever it is, 233,000 or so in terms of lost revenue, you don't really see it in the bottom line of the revenue category for the FY20 fiscal year, because you would have seen it show up in a June monthly report or a May monthly report or an April monthly report, which we created, but we didn't have finance committee meetings, so you didn't see it. We will feel it acutely as we start FY21, because we will have no summer camp revenue in FY21. So we're already more than $250,000 down from where we typically would be for a fiscal year in terms of the revenue we earn from fees. Similarly, for this summer, come enough. Whereas in usual years, we also have other programming that generates revenue in the summer. We also have rental activities that generates revenue in the summer. The only revenue we're generating right now is revenue from pass sales, which are then used to make reservations. So we're really, if we break $10,000 for the entire summer in revenue from fees, I'll be stunned. Because we can't. We can only bring in 8 participants, 4 if you're registering for a ceramics class because of the social distancing requirement for that environment. There's very limited space. We aren't offering any youth classes for the summer, so just to make a long, sad story short, the summer is going to be a very dry season for revenue for FY21. We lost almost 50% of our annual FY20 revenue we would have achieved from the Professional Touring Artist Series because of the loss of spring events. And the other significant area of lost revenue was facility rentals that were all canceled from March until the end of June. So despite all of that, because of the excellent performance of the tax base and the stock market, we did achieve sufficient revenue cushion to end the year at well, almost 100% of our revenue, our projected revenue. The vast, obviously the vast majority of that is the revenue from taxes and interest and programming that we did from summer of 2019 through to March of 2020.
Could I ask you a question, please? Just to make sure that I'm interpreting the tables right. When you read across the column that says remaining balance, which is usually small, not as big, can that be interpreted more or less as the difference between, or the loss of revenue based on the shutdown?
In all of the program categories, it can. You have
Well,
to
certainly
remember
not taxes or
with
anything.
revenue, the red numbers are good and the black numbers are
Right.
bad. So certainly in aquatics, that number is a combination of both the COVID impact as well as the fact that the first half of the fiscal year was the last 6 months of 2019 when the pool was closed. So all the revenue that's in the aquatics line item is basically revenue from February
Right.
and nothing else, because we only got about a week and a half of activity in March. And the revenue we would have achieved in fitness, in youth and teen, in lifelong learning is all the second half of the winter season plus the entirety of the spring and summer in June offering.
So the difference between that and the revised budget is, in fact, the impact of the shutdown. Is that correct? That's kind of the way I was interpreting it, as you say, except, of course, for taxes, interest, and the aquatics.
I'm not sure what the shortfall in revenue is because of COVID, except in the case of the aquatics.
Oh, yeah.
That's what you're
Yeah, because I was trying to make a ballpark idea of what the revenue and expenditure effect of the shutdown was. And the way I interpreted it was that this remaining balance, other than those 3 items, the revenue, was in fact the effect of the shutdown. And then the same thing for the expenditure.
You can say that about the revenue, but you can't say it about the expenses, because remember, there was the instructions from the county were to assign pandemic leave to the schedules of all employees, whether they were merit or non-merit, for the first full 6 weeks of the shutdown. And thereafter, what we maintained, obviously, we had to maintain the merit salaries for all full-time and part-time merit employees. And those employees either teleworked or in a couple of cases, there were employees who did take the emergency COVID relief leave that was allowed by the federal government's second COVID Act. Exempt employees, we maintained a core schedule for exempt employees that related either to, we had to continue to man the aquatics venue throughout the winter and spring because we were still doing all of the punch list work. And you have to keep lifeguarding the pool if there are workers in the pool environment. So we didn't significantly reduce our ongoing core aquatics costs. We didn't fail to use people and pay people wherever we could to do the videotaping, the online content that was being generated. We continued to do the safety and facility repairs, so we funded all of our maintenance staff. So there were many activities that continued on the expense side that we covered.
And yet still, the year-to-date expenses were considerably less
They
than
were,
the budget.
they were, if you look at the personnel, yes, they were much less than what could have been the case.
$880,000.
Well, yes, but we also, you have to remember, we also typically do save money in personnel and we do save money in operating categories. In a typical year, we generally have remaining unspent funds of between $500,000 and $700,000. So it isn't as unusual or breathtaking on the expense side
Yeah.
as it will be on the revenue side.
So the interpretation is not exact, but still, I get the impression that we saved more money because of the shutdown than we lost in revenue.
That's not true.
That's not true?
No, because we saved all of the direct cost of content. But there is also cost, not in the merit salaries, but in the exempt salaries to do customer service, to do maintenance, to do lifeguarding, to do, theater technician, safety training. We try to keep a baseline of activity that we either were keeping for safety reasons or for retaining and sustaining a core group of employees from the content side.
So we should,
So what is true is that we save more money than usual. And that can be attributed to far more canceled programs than normal. But you can't, it's not a one-for-one equivalency.
Isn't there a loss of revenue that isn't really, that we expect to see reflected, as you were saying, in the next fiscal year instead of here? So I think the lost revenue is understated here, because some of it's going to show up in the next fiscal year, because we reverse it out of here anyway, because we deliver on it in the next fiscal year.
That's right.
And so there's a whole chunk of revenue that doesn't look like it's that bad, but that's because that was money that we should have collected in May and April that you won't really see on the ledger, really.
We won't ever see
we
it.
won't see it.
So
Oh,
we
no,
lost,
I mean, that we would
right,
have seen.
we lost all the
for this coming
revenue
year.
that's enumerated that we had already achieved from summer camp enrollment and from facility rentals in terms of payments that were made in the spring. But a very small portion of that was for activity that occurred in March, the beginning of March. Most of it was for activity that was canceled or activity that isn't going to occur in the summer cycle of FY21.
Right, so the revenue side of camps that we see in this past fiscal year reflects the robustness of the previous cycle.
Right,
It doesn't
summer
reflect
2019.
The challenge
Right.
of this year. So I just want to make sure you understand,
Yeah.
there's that, is being understated.
This timing difference is
Right.
always
Right.
confusing. Okay, yeah.
But looking at the operational expense and personnel expense, and the remaining balance, and that when the year-to-date versus the revised, it looks like about 1.8 or 9 million of saved expenses. Which
Well,
is a
that's,
sad thing, because it meant that was, well, those are services we weren't able to provide.
Right.
And-
oh yeah, I'm not saying whether it's good or bad.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just
yeah,
trying
just-
to interpret
But
what
it's
it means.
significant, I mean, it's a real.
It is
Oh.
significant,
Yeah.
yeah. Any other questions about the revenue picture? So moving forward to the personnel picture, here we would normally be in the $300,000 to $400,000 of savings range, and we're at nearly double of that. And that's primarily due to COVID canceled programs, but it's also due in part to the fact that as soon as the pandemic hit, in addition to providing pandemic leave, which the CARES Act reimbursed us for, which was about $140,000 of leave used by staff, in addition to that, hiring was frozen. So we have several vacancies that we would have filled in a normal year that are in the merit service that are unfilled at this moment, and that will stay unfilled until we're very confident, not just in this agency, but on a countywide basis, that the long-term economic impact of COVID-19 is going to dissipate come FY 22, 23, and onward. So it isn't solely a consequence of canceled programming. It is largely a consequence of canceled programming, but in addition to that, $140,000 is reimbursed expenses that we would have otherwise been paying out of the Small District 5 funds, and vacancies that we're just holding vacant because there's a hiring freeze, and we don't at present have a justification to proceed. When this is going to get tricky is as we move deeper into the fall, because our theater technical director of 35 plus years is in the end of her deferred retirement option program, and she will be leaving in January. And that's 35 years of institutional knowledge that will be going on for tour. So our original intent was to dual encumber that position and hire somebody while she's still here so that there can be a good handoff, a good transition period. So when we get to late September, early October, we'll be looking at that particular situation very closely and likely, I mean, this really depends on what we see happening by the end of August with tax receipts, but assuming that we are rational to hit a target of about 80% in FY21 of what our FY19 actual tax revenue was, we will look to get an exception to the hiring freeze so that we can fill that key position. Any questions at all about the personnel?
I have a question. I paid it last year, it's the same, but personal costs for media and sponsorships. What?
There's no personnel costs for sponsorships. The
Yeah.
media cost center personnel expenses are for the full-time merit positions. There are 4 full-time merit positions in that department and 1 part-time assistant position for that department. And that's what those personnel costs are.
Because I knew there was nothing for sponsorships.
No.
So,
It's just the name of the cost center.
okay.
Going once? Okay. In operating expenditures, in this category where you see the red numbers for June, those are balances from closed purchase orders. As you recall, every year at the beginning of the fiscal year, we encumber in purchase orders for long-term obligations, and then as we get closer and closer, those encumbrance balances are spent down, and when we reach the closeout period and close them out, the remaining balances are restored, and that's why you see red numbers in the June column. And again, we achieved considerably more savings in this category than we normally do. And the bulk of it is program expenses that are typically assigned to contracts for recreational activities, theater tickets for trips and tours, bus reservations, all the kinds of activities that normally take place in the spring and the month of June that couldn't take place. We also, another big chunk of savings arrived because we, as you recall, back in what feels like the dark past now of 2019, we boosted our summer concert and entertainment offsite programming to more than 100 events, and those events typically start in just a little bit past mid-May, the third week or the Memorial Day weekend of May. So all that activity that would have occurred in May and June at Reston Station and Lake Anne and Reston Town Square Park was all canceled. Now some of it we went ahead and deferred and tried to arrange tapings of performers who were representative of those experiences that we could then upload to our YouTube channel. But that's, by the time we're all done with that, that's going to be a rocking total of 8 concerts, not the 30 or 40 that would otherwise have taken place during that time.
Well, we are paying people to do this from the YouTube.
For the, yes, oh yeah,
Yeah.
no, we're not asking them to do it for free.
Good, yeah.
Nobody's working for free.
Good.
So that really is the bulk of what comprised the savings.
Working for free.
Well, you all work for free. You have to work for free. You work for free.
That's all. That was just, it was random.
You work for roll-ups,
There you go.
wraps or whatever it is. Wraps and chips.
What about the very large number for maintenance? There was much less spent on maintenance.
Well, remember, this was a period also, we can't forget this was our aquatics renovation period. So we would have obligated more money for water and electricity and for utilities based on prior year actuals than we actually ended up spending or using. So there's a whole half a year. It tells you how big a utility footprint the old leaky pool was on an operating expenditure side. So the return of funds in those categories was very significant.
So do we have a new budget for these things now that the pool is fixed and it's no longer leaking? And
Yes,
we
we
have
get
a
to
new
that.
ventilation system? and-
Well, we do. Let's remember, we've only been operating it for a couple of months, so we don't have a lot of actual experience to go by, but yes, we do have a.
It's still not at full capacity.
No, that's right. So, we'll see. We'll save money. We will save money because it is new systems and the pool doesn't leak and, yes, so there'll be savings there. But that's what those substantial numbers are about. Any questions about operating? Okey-dokes. In terms of the capital projects expenditures, I just will say before we get any deeper into this that capital projects are the bane of my existence because they last forever. They get carried forward from one fiscal year to the next. They're very calendar dependent, and the biggest ones take seemingly forever to close out. So The most significant capital project, of course, of the past year was the pool renovation project. What you see in the year-to-date column is all of the encumbrances, and the encumbrances include the contingency funds for the construction project. So our present conservative projection remains that $800,000 of that contingency money will be coming back to us. We had another project meeting on Friday, and I asked for and got another total project estimate update, and DPWS anticipates as of August 1st that we'll save roughly $60,000 on the encumbrance for the building design construction branch. Remember, that's DPWS's construction oversight. There's some county construction and testing allocations that will save a little bit of money on through 3.6 thousand. But right now, what we're looking at between the contingency savings and the liquidated damages, about $850,000 in returned funding from the construction contingency allocation. They're projecting now a total of $920,000 in change. We'll see. But I feel really confident about $800,000.
Where will that money be accounted for?
Well, if we can get through the year-end statement and we can move onward to the public hearing slides, we'll walk through that now. It can't be accounted for in real terms until we close out the project. So we figured out a way to characterize it though in the public hearing slides. Right now, it can't be characterized in the year-end figures because it's still encumbered. So what you see in terms of remaining balances in the capital projects category, of all of those remaining balances, you should only count on about $800,000 to $900,000 of contingency funding coming back out and into the fund balance. The other balances will be reallocated and spent against the projects. And we'll get into that in the public hearing slides. But for all intents and purposes, I just want to make it clear that this number, 2.6 million remaining balance, is not truly a remaining balance. Okay? It's just unspent project money. Any other questions or comments about the year-end report?
This is quite about the year-end report, but why is the punch list taking so long?
Because it's a huge project, and they had a terrible plumbing contractor they ended up having to fire. They had to essentially tear out all of the plumbing that Ronco installed. They brought in a new plumber, Delmar Plumbing, and all of that plumbing had to be reinstalled. So if anybody asked you if there was a silver lining to COVID-19, that was the silver lining. So instead of having to deal with faulty work that we would have had to do overnight and in spare hours here or there through a fully operational pool or accessible pool, we got to spend the time it took to take out the bad and replace it with the good. And we agreed at the outset of the shutdown that we would take full advantage of it, and in good faith, Branch Construction agreed that they would take their time, they would hire the right kind of contractor to do the work. They're going to be, I'm sure, dealing with their first contractor for a long time, but we won't be. And so because of that situation, there are going to have to be some peculiarities. we agreed to stop the clock on liquidated damages with the date that we actually opened the pool on January 27th. So between the 27th and now, we haven't assessed any liquidated damages. There's been no cost to us, really. The upside of that is that everything has been tested as it's been installed, as it's been reinstalled, and they can really take the time it is requiring to do all the little things like labeling and then testing and then balancing, and they're just on the verge of now the commissioning activities. So it's been an arduous process, but at the end of the day, we'll have a far better product. The other thing at the end of a project that takes a very long period of time is the contractor, the construction company has to present and provide the owner operating manuals for every single system that's down there. So all of the HVAC that's new, all of the plumbing that's new, all of the pumps that's new, all of the filter systems that are new, everything has to have its own owner operator manual. And every one of those manuals has to be reviewed by the architect and engineering firms for accuracy and for applicability against the equipment that was installed. And then the last thing they have to provide, and it has to be reviewed, are what are called the as-builts, which we have said, please take particular care with, because if you remember back in the beginning of this project, our old as-builts for the old pool didn't have an accurate placement of a key pipe, and that added 10 days to our construction contract while they literally poked holes in the dirt to find the pipe. So that review process also takes time. So it's going to be a little while before this project closes out, but it is closing out this year. And the pool is usable, as everybody knows if you've been in it. So.
Can we get anything back from this plumber who screwed up?
We shouldn't be getting it back. It's branch construction. We should be getting it back.
I hope they sue them.
Well,
It's out of our.
we don't have. But we're on tape, so let's let branch construction deal with that. That's their headache. Okay, so that's the FY20 year-end closeout document that will be posted separately on its own, like we started doing last year on the website for all the people who like to see how things went. The next thing I wanted to go through, this is where I am right now with the slides. So this isn't official yet. I wanted to go through them relatively quickly. There are a couple of things that I hope will only happen this year. There will be the COVID-19 agency response slides. I do think it's important at the front end of the hearing to take a moment to acknowledge the loss of Ivan Cole and to acknowledge the hurt and the loss that people have experienced because of this pandemic. And then the two highlight slides, this should look very familiar. These are just summaries of what's in the annual report. I won't put a lot of verbiage against those. It will just be basically the things that we accomplished. Moving to slide 5, the strategic planning. As we look ahead, remember this is the last year of our strategic plan, and now not only will we be crafting a new strategic plan, but we will also be, as you now know, we have numerous other plans that we have generated in support of our CAPR standards. So we will need to look at our master plan, our program plan, our strategic plan, and have those reflect each other appropriately as we build the 21 to 26, the next 5-year strategic plan. We'll talk about the COVID-19 response. We'll mention that we did achieve the success we achieved with CAPRA, but that isn't formally the case until the October CAPRA body having an interview with Bev and me that Bill and the Park Authority people tell us lasts about 5 minutes, and then they officially say we're certified, accredited. Yeah. And then none of these things should look new or unusual to you. I think that the issue of greatest interest to a lot of people about the performing arts venue will continue to be examined. It'll be examined in the same way we have been examining it, with both information that we can gather from the county as well as input from the public. I don't see anything dispositive about that happening for at least 9 to 12 months. So it's basically a matter of ongoing discussion and interest, in addition to all the other facility issues that we have to start thinking ahead to. One of which is you will have the opportunity to take ownership somehow or other of the Lake Ann facility. It won't happen during my time with you, but it will happen shortly after that. So we will have to start thinking about that, and that should feature in the next strategic plan in some way in the facility section. Yeah.
So, starting a year or two ago, the county was doing its examination of arts needs around the county. And I don't know if that got caught up in the COVID or whether there's been.
I chair that, and it has gotten caught up in COVID,
What's the
but
status?
we were in the process of drafting that plan in March. We had an early draft circulating to task force members for editing. The next draft should be circulating roughly at the end of August, and the target is for some kind of document to become part of the comprehensive plan policy, visually performing arts policy reference documents by the end of December.
Okay.
We're in the process of investigating what contracts are available to us in the county for the website redesign. The media team has developed a very lengthy set of criteria and assets that we want to see that website delivered to us. So that's going on. And we're going to look, I think, long and hard at how we can be supportive of the most vulnerable families in our community during the period of time that virtual learning is the only avenue for school. So,
Yeah, that's very important, and I'm glad to hear that. But the schools generally, I mean, if there's a way that we can help the elementary and middle and high schools around here, because I don't know what they're going to do over the next 12 months as they try to do online stuff. Maybe our YouTube capability can help them in some way, or
Well,
something, and then you can think
sure.
about that.
I had a conversation last week with Keisha Deegan, who's the Deputy County Exec for the HHS Services
Whatever that is.
System. And there is a big working group of county and school leadership on exactly what kinds of support systems need to be put in place for the most vulnerable kids, whether from the special ed side or the family resources being diminished. And I expressed to her that we have put a footprint on our daytime hours so that we can offer space for pods of tutoring that can be stood up for small groups of kids in conjunction with Opportunity Neighborhood Outreach. In addition, the programming we're putting up for fall is designed to help fill in the socialization gaps for all families. It's going to be tricky because it has to be a lot smaller. We are trying to figure out the right mix of, we want to put online content up, but you have to be mindful of resources for people who don't have, a whole big craft corner in their playroom to work with. So it takes thought and intentionality to do it right, and we have said we're going to support resource allocation toward whatever is determined that we can do best, whether it's having learning pods located here, or some extracurricular tutoring located here, or what have you. So that is going on.
Particularly through the opportunity villages, but the neighborhood opportunity villages. A tutoring program seems like it would be good. That would be better than having something here, because there's always been a transportation problem with the opportunity neighborhoods getting here.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do. There will be some transportation support available. I mean, Paul can probably speak more intelligently to what the school system is trying to stand up than I can, but I know that it's a huge jigsaw puzzle. And it isn't just the school system, it's SAC and the childcare infrastructure that they're trying to figure out how to use the resources available to safely stand up as much childcare as is going to be needed, not just by the typical childcare burden, which is huge. And remember, it's a footprint that's 3 times bigger than the available space to support it, which is also true of schools. So there's a big logistics challenge.
Well, and I think that with them going purely virtual, that takes a bit of a load off of what they need in terms of help with teaching stuff and supporting instruction. But it's all about the wraparound services. It's all about the family support. That still is a big deal.
Right.
If they had stayed with the blended, and if they ever pivot to the blended, which I'm not convinced is a certainty, but if they were good at the blended, then the supports that the schools and families will need will be significant. So, but right now, I think it's more about the sort of the wraparound services, the sort of family support. If they ever go for that blended option, it's going to be up there.
So when you refer to the blended option, what exactly?
It really means 40% school. It means students in school 2 days a week and not in school the other 3 days a week. And with, think of it as in school 2 days a week and homework for the rest of the days.
No, but I've got grandkids and they're looking at no school except on TV or the computer for maybe
That's
a
not no
semester.
school. So we can have a deep discussion about this. That is not no school. That is not showing up at a building. That's what that is. As long as it's a competent school, they should actually still be doing instruction much more effectively with the pure virtual than in the blended.
Yeah,
Much
so
more.
regardless of, and I think what is likely to be the case, anybody can see this just by watching the news. Every system that has opened up has had to close significant numbers of classrooms because we found out last week my grandson is COVID positive and nobody else in the household in California tested positive. So this is a very weird and tricky and difficult virus to manage. And schools are not, look at that YMCA camp in
Oh,
Georgia.
yeah.
Hundreds of kids end up COVID positive. It's
So,
just crazy to think that there are gonna be kids back in school the way it was
right.
anytime soon.
So just to the extent, we're not gonna be fully providing our usual classes here.
Yeah.
To the extent we have resources that might help the schools or the particularly needy families, please do it.
Yeah, we will. So slide 7, just really discusses what the revenue impact by category was. And it describes the budget planning factors that we're going to apply to the agency budget in FY21, not the published budget, but the budget we're going to work to, and the outline that we're going to develop for the FY22 budget. And this has changed since May. If you recall, in May I said we would manage to 75% of the FY19 actual revenue and 50% of our actual revenue from fees. Well, it's clear we're not going to achieve 50% of our actual revenue from fees in FY21. So that's why we've changed the factors. And I did share these with Joe Mondoro, who's the CFO for the county. And they don't know, and we don't know. They feel like the residential side of the tax base in the county is going to perform fairly well. They're not sure about the commercial side. That's where the weakness is already showing up. But for us, even though for us that's still 45 to 47% of our tax base, the lion's share of that is derived from the escalated value of properties aligned with the corridor, with the silver line. That is continuing to develop, so those values shouldn't change significantly because they're still building, which is the state they were in FY19. We didn't anticipate with the FY21 revenue target from taxes that we would be seeing revenue from built-out projects.
So just a comment that some of it's still being built, but there are a lot of developers with no idea what's going to happen in the office
Right.
market. And they're not sure what to do in the other markets either. So there may be some inertia, but we expect a decline for at least a couple, 3 years, and maybe more.
Well, I shared this approach. They said it seemed sound.
Yeah.
We'll see if it is. We'll monitor it as we go.
Right.
I feel like overall, big picture, we're fine for FY21. And if we monitor our spending carefully through FY21, we should be fine for FY22. Beyond that, it will start to get dicey if there isn't a vaccine, if the economy doesn't reignite, if.
Seems to me your estimates are conservative.
Yes.
80%.
But I'm a lot happier talking to you about having more money than we thought we would than I would be if we were here talking about having less money. So I think being conservative is wise at this point. The slide 8 is just the same overview of how we do this. And then usually we only use one slide for the CIP, CMP, but it's just the print is getting too small, the number of projects and how many times they move forward from one fiscal year to the next too frequent. So I broke it into 3 slides. And rather than try to explain the dollars and cents of carryover on a project-by-project basis and reallocation, there is a final note on the 3rd slide about what the FY21 contingency amount will be. 1.9 million of carried over capital project balances. And then there are notes in each fiscal year regarding either what we have already spent on the project or what was budgeted for the project, and where we are with respect to projects assigned to FY22. Essentially, the FY21 budget column reflects projects you saw last year. I would draw your attention to the fact that the theater seating replacement project has become a lot more complicated than we thought it would. We thought we would just be putting seats on the old floor and running aisle lights on the old floor and replacing carpet on the old floor and digging a tiny little trench for assisted listening wiring, but that turns out not to be possible for whatever make-work construction. I didn't say that. But as it turns out, now we have to, what do you call that? Jackhammer the old floor and do cement work. And the rake has to be shifted and the trenches have to be dug for the lights that have to be buried and can't be on top of the carpet. There's a whole lot of code that has changed since the last time we replaced these seats. So it's not quite the simple, straightforward project we had hoped. And finding that out has cost us architectural and engineering costs that we didn't anticipate of about $27,000 as well. So we have about $60,000 in new cement and related work, and we have about $27,000 in A&E work against what was a $150,000 project originally. So thank you, Aquatics Project, for $800,000 back from that contingency.
So
Yeah.
where does the $800,000
We're coming to it.
to table 11?
Pardon me?
Well, I presume you're talking about slide 11,
No,
or is it 10?
no. It's the Aquatics Project is on slide 12.
Okay, well,
It's in front of you, Dick. There's a whole set of big figures.
This one, right next to the book there. See a little printer?
oh, I thought
No,
it
it's
was
this-
in the book. That's
it's
why
this
I was,
one.
that's why I was
No, no,
looking
no.
at it on the.
No.
Yeah, the other one is old, that's the current one.
Yeah,
I see, oh, okay, sorry, I thought it would be in here. if we were-
Yeah.
all right.
Okay, but at least the table that Karen said shows the capital reserve now up to about 3 million.
Let's go through the
Go through the deck.
CMP pages. Look at
Okay.
your
Pick us up
calendar.
on what, you're on page 11 now?
Page 11,
Oh, all right.
10, 11, and 12. are
Okay,
the
so I don't
capital
have to do it on my
projects.
phone, all right,
Don't have to look on your phone.
okay.
So, I talked through the horror show of the center stage seating replacement. That's on page 10. Page 11 is nothing exciting, just where we stand with Lake Ann. The only note there is that we looked at the community survey, the 2019 community survey, many comments about people hating the restrooms at Lake Ann. So we're gonna repurpose some of that $50,000 that we've had assigned to customer service desk redesign and add $15,000 to accomplish a restroom renovation ahead of the customer service desk redesign. Okay. So then on page 12, there's a note about the original budget of the pool renovation and the likely anticipated savings. And the locker room improvements, which we accomplished using some of those early savings, and that's the total cost there of those $176,000 on the locker room. And then the carryover number, the aggregate number of project balances encumbered and unencumbered that have been assigned to the FY21 budget. Okay, that's what the carryover number is. And that's what the notes for this slide will say. Okay? Now, on slide 13, as we normally do, we normally present a 3-year picture of our actual revenue and expense history, but we're now 2 months after the time we normally have this hearing. So this would have been, in a normal year, FY 17, 18, and 19. But since we have the picture of the FY 20 actuals, we figured why not just bump it up. So this is for this. The only thing that's of note here, you'll see that this ending fund balance ties to the notes in the year-end statement. And you also will see that of that $5.6 million, the assignment to reserves reflects the decision you made to increase the capital project reserve amount to $3.5 million in FY20.
So we achieved our target in 1 year.
In FY20.
I didn't think it was going to be achieved for 2 or 3 years.
Well, don't hold your breath,
Okay.
because
That's good.
next page, you will see, as a consequence of COVID-19 and the reduced revenue that we're projecting, we return to deficit spending for FY21 and FY22, assuming those are rational targets. So these are the budget outlines, and gives a picture of what we anticipate spending in aggregate in personnel and operating at the agency level in FY21, not in the published budget, which you'll see on the next slide, but what our agency target is, and then the adopted budget is on the left there, next to it. The amounts in the FY21 and FY22 columns are based on our FY19 actuals. So they're very conservative, very conservative. And here you see the carryover number that ties to the FY21 carryover number in the capital equipment, capital project slides. Okay, so flipping the page to page 15, now, at last dip, you will see as you go down about 2/3 of the way on the spreadsheet, the total disbursements, and then you will see in the FY21 internal target column, the renovation savings return to the fund. And here we have also, we are proposing, and this is for you to say yay or nay to, that we load into the FY22 proposed budget outline an additional $300,000 in case the Congress acts appropriately and the economy starts recovering and the election results in November are positive for the nation and the vaccine comes out and it works and there is sufficient recovery for the beginning of FY22, which remember doesn't happen until July of next year, that we would want to be able to go back to a more normal spending profile. It will be hidden. It won't be available to the staff to spend. Renata has an account where she can hide it. But I do think it's important to build it in. We can always save it.
That makes sense.
So that's how it looks. If we build that in, take the 800 in savings, we come down to an ending balance at the end of FY22, which is June 30th of 2022, of $3 million. So goodbye, $3.5 million capital project, reserve funds.
Given the realities of what we're dealing with, if that figure stays, it's pretty good.
Yeah. So are there elements of this that you want to change or that you are uncomfortable with as it's presented? I decided not to write all the notes before you weighed in on how many slides and what you want the slides to say. So I welcome your questions and your feedback.
And look, having gone through the draft and then reading it here, it looks like a pretty reasonable presentation. It seems to cover the issues people are going to have questions about. Nobody understands all the damn numbers, but
Yeah.
but at least you got to put them out there. You got to put them out there and explain them. But it looks like a reasonable package to me.
It's gonna be a weird couple of years. It's
Oh, yeah.
gonna be very hard to track our experience, financial or otherwise, to anything we've experienced in the
I
past.
mean, if we end up hollowing out that middle level of businesses, which is a very real risk,
Yeah,
property value factored on all those commercial things that we think are going up, they're going to go up.
Yeah.
So I think being cautious is what we have to do.
And actually, I've always thought in the past that the projections for taxes were always very conservative. And now maybe they're going to be a little more on target, just given for the big picture, I like the shape of things. I think having that 300,000 makes a lot of sense. So that we can ramp stuff up if we want to, and that we have that flexibility, I think makes sense. The only question I have on the numbers, and I'm probably missing something really obvious, but on slide 14, the capital project reserve is showing 1.821. And on slide 15, it's showing 2.056. And I expected there to be like a $300,000 difference, and there isn't.
there's the 800,000 is not in slide 14. The encumbrance carried into 21 includes the whole new project encumbrance with the contingency. So
Yeah.
there's no showing, I mean, we could, if you want, we can add the 2 lines to slide 14 as well, and then it will come out right.
I think that would,
It doesn't feel like it's going to come out exactly right. It looks like it comes close, but
Yeah.
the last 2 digits don't seem to be right.
Okay,
And because everything else is changing in the 6th digit, I'm surprised that there are changes in the digits 4 and 5.
okay.
So
Sure.
just, if you could check on that, please.
Sure.
I haven't gone through and checked all the numbers, so those just stood out to me as
Sure.
something that would be hard for me to explain. Because I was expecting to see a $500 difference, with the 800 coming back and the
Right.
300 being set aside.
Right.
but I think it's reasonable to put the 800 in the table on page 14 too.
Well, we'll double check,
Yeah.
make sure they-
Double check, but if
They
the
don't tell.
800 and 300 only exist on slide 15 and not on 14, but that's the difference between them, I'm fine with that, because then that makes it easy to see, here's what we're proposing in terms of
Yeah.
300, and here's part of how we're funding it, because we're trying to be very
Right.
conservative, and this isn't promised. Anyway, I'm okay with that, as long as the numbers actually line up.
We'll check it.
Thank you.
It looks like, we'll check
Sorry,
it. Yeah, we'll check it.
I'm sure you guys will check it. But again, I like the overall approach.
Okay. All right, so, notes, and I'll email those out with the updated last slide, the slide 14, if we have to. And then one of the things I want to draw your attention to otherwise, we launched the summer concerts on Thursday at Lake Ann Plaza. People were very well behaved. They had their masks on. They wandered around a lot, but the activity that wasn't socially distanced was taking place within the boundaries of the restaurant seating and not in the audience area for the concert. So we tried to ignore what was happening in the restaurants and focus on what was happening with the audience. And fortunately, they played for about 15-20 minutes and then it started to rain. So we had to cancel. On Friday, the footprint in front of the stage, the grass area at Preston Station that people would normally be sitting on, isn't available anymore because it's surrounded by a hedge. The good news is that the platform, the stage, is under the overhang of the big V building.
That's what it is.
But there's very little space for the audience. There's an audience at the Founding Farmers outdoor seating area. But we'll just see how it goes and make sure that people wear masks and behave responsibly.
So about the non-building, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Non-building.
That's the
Did you get, what was the audience like? How many people?
So including the restaurants, the audience on Thursday night was about 100 people, and the audience on Friday night was more like 50. But most of that was restaurant on Friday night, maybe 10 or so people in the audience area. We are taping out squares that shared household members can sit in. We're requiring masks. There's lots of event signage. We're taking stanchions that broke off the band, and we're taking hand sanitizer, one of those portable ones. So we're trying very hard to promote good behavior. I am concerned about the multicultural festival. We can't support the food vendor footprint. We can't support the craft vendor footprint. There's no way to have entertainment and also have the activities and community organization tents that go around it. And I'm very, very worried now that the plug has been pulled on every single other big community event in Reston for the fall, that there will be too much demand to support. So I bring it to you. Well, it's a big decision to make, and I don't think that you should be unaware of it or not involved in it. I want to share some of the discomfort that at the staff level we feel about it.
The only thing I would say that you're waiting on is, and I don't know what the time frames are for decision, like drop dead points, but maybe at the end of August, you look at it.
Well, our challenge is that we're going to try to stand up a fall program guide online on August 15th for a September 1 kickoff to enrollment.
In that case, I don't think you could do it. Because the only thing I can imagine is that if by the end of August, everything drops and plummets in terms of infections, we need to justify it, and we'd be hoping for that. But in the absence of that, I don't think we can in good conscience.
I'd almost rather find ourselves in that happy position and create a pop-up event than plan the festival.
No, I totally agree. Totally agree.
I think you should
Is it
plan
possible to
not
have
to do it.
a great naturalization ceremony?
USCIS is canceled altogether. They're going to be furloughed in September.
So,
Is there a lot
so
of-
the only thing I mean, I basically agree with what everybody has to say, but I would note that they do a farmer's market at Lake Ann every Saturday. And there are a lot of different stations, and a lot of people moving around it. Now, they move around it and then they exit, so it's not a long-term thing.
Yeah,
It's
but-
also a
Maybe there is-
limited population, it's also a very limited population that's allowed in there at any one time.
I understand, there are lines to get in, but all I'm saying is, it may be possible to do a small-scale event.
No, because you
No,
can't.
this
But
is
it
just
isn't,
transactional.
it isn't all what we've done in the past.
This is
That's
not
the
transactional.
This is different and not normal, and I've been at the farmer's market too. But I think this is one of the reasons why we're at 155,000 people a day. We all want to go back to what's normal. Like I always say with the popular ocean, you have to do this. You have to think about the artist safety, everyone coming. There are so many people crammed in there. It's wonderful. It's
Oh, I
beautiful.
understand.
Same thing happened with our, Western Historic Trust. We didn't want to get rid of the our
Cardboard.
boat regatta. But last year we had over 3,000 people on that plaza.
Oh my God.
And I agree, you cannot
And
do
so,
that.
so I mean, I know we wanted to talk and discuss, but this is about safety for everyone involved. And something left in a small pop-up maybe,
Chalk it up.
we just can't do it. It's just,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
there's not even, I don't think we should, well, we
Yeah,
have
no,
to discuss that.
discussion,
Done.
I think
Safety,
discussion
we're talking about
over,
saving
man.
lives.
We've all decided to go
Yeah.
Well, I
But
think,
the resort.
I believe me, that it's a painful experience to go through and, it's, I don't know what's gonna happen with the concerts, but those are only 90 minutes of one band
Right.
in one spot, of an evening that is a weeknight evening. The metro isn't operating, so we know we're not gonna get that crowd there. And again, we have the safety valve of the restaurants, as ridiculous as they are, for having the kind of seating that Calypso's has is a little frightening, but, they have to meet their requirements too. So I think, from a planning perspective, this is a decision we have to make now in terms of the festival footprint. And then we'll see what happens, but it sure doesn't look like the country is.
What about the parties
Right.
to the festival? Is that, because there are several institutions involved in the multi-cultural festival. Have any of the other institutions that are involved said?
Well, the major, all of the other partner institutions are present on the day up. The significant contribution that Wrestling Association makes is the volunteer recruitment piece. And I can't fathom that people are gonna wanna volunteer for 4-hour shifts at a festival event. So I just,
Without us, there is no event.
right.
Yeah.
So just to be clear,
No,
without
I
us, there is no
understand,
event.
but the other partners may have.
No, but
views
there's
on
some
it.
people, can I make a move so we can move on?
Yeah.
You've already made me miss Joy. Okay.
Focus on yourself.
Yeah, I can do it later. She's paid. No, but I don't think we should even contemplate the festival this year. Just, we can put it up to a vote, but I think it's a no-brainer.
Do you want a motion?
No, I don't need a
No, you don't need
motion,
a motion.
I just need a sense of the board, and
Yeah,
that's
I think
what
we
I
are.
want.
I think, yeah.
And the sense of the board is no. Okay?
Thank you.
It's just that is the most frightening thing possible.
Yeah.
We did that,
And I think we also
before.
have to be a little conscious too of the artists that normally perform at the festival are people who are likely to be the most challenged by what's happening. So
Great.
I think we have to figure out a route to something in the spring maybe that helps them, but.
Or something online.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not doing any crowds.
So we run the whole business.
Do we need
Is
a
there any
Unless you-
motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thanks for the second, all those in favor?
Aye.
This,
Thank you, Lana.
2020 meeting is
Thank
adjourned.